Hello and welcome to Best in UC TV. I'm your host, Heather Clancy. Now I have a confession to make, and I'm going, not supposed to be biased as a journalist, but this is one of the topics that I feel very passionately about, and that's how do you use technology and new technologies to help education. And today we're going to talk about how specifically video conferencing can open up the world of really K through 12 and elementary at schools and allow new applications and new functions and services that potentially haven't been discovered to this point. My guest to talk about this amazing topic is Wes Burkett, and he is the Vice President of Sales with AVTEQ. Wes, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
Appreciate it. Wes, the first thing I just want to ask you is, we were just talking before we turned the cameras on here about the sorts of things that you can do with video conferencing in the education environment. What sorts of applications are we talking about? What are the solutions that are made possible?
There are so many in the education space. It's one that Texas has embraced. It was one of the early adopters of video conferencing, Ohio being another state, and I've had the privilege of being involved in those from the early mid-90s to the late 90s to really developing what has become today more of the educational service networks here across the state of Texas and others. It's just amazing what the technology brings, especially to rural students. And here in Texas, we have a lot of rural applications and rural ISDs in which students don't have the ability, due to just being out in the middle of nowhere, essentially, to travel to either Dallas or Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, San Antonio. They just don't ever get the opportunity to see these locations. So consequently, they get unfairly, I believe, pigeonholed into who they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do when they grow up. And with video conferencing capabilities, not only does it give them the ability to work with an instructor that may be in a big city who can deal with a particular subject that they just don't have the experience in with that ISD, or on the level of virtual field trips. The virtual field trips are incredible when you see it in an elementary level setting. When you're seeing kids not only looking at whether it's a museum or something to do with NASA, but more importantly, the other students that may be across the country or across the world, and to see those kids interact with people that it's totally outside of their social sphere, you can just see their mind opening up to the possibilities of life and what's out there beyond their little small town. And it's just, it's doing great things. And with the cost coming down, you're seeing more and more video conferencing technology being put into these ISDs. So
one of the challenges, though, right, is you have these old school buildings. You have buildings that have classrooms that are, less than ideal for a technology like this. How do you make this technology accessible? How do you make sure that it's installed in a way or made mobile enough for the majority of students to use it, or as many as possible?
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about the technology shifts that we've been seeing over the years. Inherently, video conferencing's challenges in the early days were due to the high per system cost. Yeah. We've seen those costs come dramatically down where a lot of folks can afford the technology today. The second factor has always been bandwidth and the expense of bandwidth. And I think one of your earlier segments identified some of the bandwidth challenges that we've had as an industry over the years. But the technology with wireless capabilities, the cost of the equipment coming down, and encompassing with a mobile solution, because schools still aren't at the point where they can proliferate video to every classroom. They need to share that, whether that's on a floor-by-floor or a school-by-school basis. But the technology just being available is really changing. There's a lot of E-rate programs, and there's a lot of things out there that give schools access to that. And one of the things that AVTEQ provides is the level of both security and mobility for those schools when they have the need to either rotate instructors throughout an ISD. That's another interesting factor that they use it for. If school ISDs that are challenged financially, they can afford a video system and bring in an instructor for a specific subject, and they can travel from school to school and have virtual classrooms daily. So they may be at one school on Monday and another school on Wednesday, but yet the students interact with that same instructor every day.
Interesting. So, again, another big topic for school districts, though, is moolah, right? You mentioned E-rate as one way to help fund this sort of technology investment, but how do you justify this? How does a district or a principal or a superintendent go to the board and get the money for this technology? How do they make the argument?
You know, with a lot of things here in the state of Texas, and I can speak to Texas from my knowledge of working with these school systems, we have had an abundance of both natural gas and wind projects here in the state of Texas.
Yep.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, they think somebody's in the back end getting rich. Well, there are people that are making a tremendous amount of money on it, but here in Texas, there's a lot of push for these because a lot of the wind and natural gas is again in rural areas, and those funds are being funneled to the school systems, to public, whether it's the public works, libraries, but the lion's share of it is going to the schools themselves, and they can then determine how best to spend that money. And not all of them are putting in new stadiums and those types of things. They're really spending money on technology because they understand the better they can educate their students, their citizens, the better the community is going to better itself over the years. And it also helps keep people in those communities rather than, oh, they hit college and they off to the big city and they never return. So there's a lot of things out there that they can justify the cost by retaining some of their students within their communities and not lose them to the big city.
Okay. Okay, so what are the gotchas, right? You know, this sounds good, but what are the potential challenges of investing in this technology or of considering an investment here? What do you have to watch out for in a school environment?
Well, school environments traditionally, you know, once again, they are really the stepchildren when it comes to budgets. They're always the ones that have to work with, you know, they have a budget and they're always, great, we've got this budget, but you're going to have to work within 80% of that budget now. And what do we work with? So the gotcha is always how to best utilize the technology, and it comes with a solid plan from a reseller or an integrator within that community on the reasons to adopt video conferencing and the money savings long term. So the gotcha being the initial financing, but I think even beyond that is adopting the technology and utilization. Once you have it, you have to put programs and curriculums in place to expose people to the technology so they become comfortable with it. And the one benefit of that is our society today, through Facebook and online, video technologies are being widely adopted by the young. So it's not as hard of a sale as it used to be. Even the instructors and teachers are becoming more technologically savvy. Our cell phones have really forced us into that. So the technology that used to be scary because it must be difficult to use, the companies are making it easier to use, but people are becoming more technologically savvy, so they're adopting it and using it more often than just sitting in the corner and collecting dust. So I think that's the biggest gotcha, is making sure that the people are comfortable with the technology, and it will proliferate itself once they start using it.
But some of the things you mentioned, like, for example, the virtual classroom example, that could drive new services and new revenue for a school district, right? I mean, how might, are you finding examples of that, or is it really just early days still?
So even, you know, a very rural town, for example, that may not have a college, whether a community college or even close proximity to a state college, what we have found, there's a lot of students out there who are either taking advanced classes in preparation for college, or even people who have special needs that don't have the freedom and flexibility to travel. In a local environment, in an elementary school or a library, we've seen where the technology is being utilized within what we call ESCs, Educational Service Centers, here in the state of Texas. And the ESCs are based around a particular region. So in Texas, we have 22 or 25 ESCs within the state. And each one of those ESCs is responsible to providing technology out to each of the independent school districts within that ESC. So what you're seeing is a lot of cross-pollination between the different ESCs to both offer content and cross-pollination when it comes to instructors. So you'll see a lot of people utilizing, you know, Texas Tech or, UT Austin, where in a medical or a law or some type of a financial class, they can beam that out across the entire state of Texas and still charge a tuition for that. And the school would get a piece of that, as well as the ESC. So there's a lot of flow between the ESCs and the higher education and even the independent school districts of monetary compensation as to how do I use my system, so on and so forth. And the telcos were even stepping up and granting a lot of free bandwidth based upon special needs children and curriculums that are offered out there.
Okay. Any final insight as to what you think might be some of the future roles for video conferencing and other video applications in education?
I think we're just going to see a lot more adoption. Even for as many years as I've been doing this, I don't think we have the penetration that's necessary for school districts to take advantage of the technology. We're just now seeing where laptops are being handed out on a classroom level. And within that, I believe you're going to see video as becoming just as an integral piece, because it gives so much flexibility, and it's just going to open up so many more avenues of revenue stream as well as education for the students. And when they see the reward is going to be students who get better grades, go on to higher education, their attendance rates are higher, so on and so forth. I think that's what education is all about, and I think those are going to be the driving factors to embrace technology more and more in the future.
Okay. Well, Wes, thanks for joining us here on Best in UC TV. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again.
And thanks for watching another episode of Best in UC TV. Until we meet again, I'm Heather Clancy.